Hey, my name is Joe Nickel, and I'm doing a presentation for my Ages Restoration class. This time. So, my presentation is based on the church history over the span of 200 years. I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, taking a living course here at BYU. And we've been talking over the semester about the foundation of the church and issues from that period. When the church we tend to talk about church history, we usually focus on the first 30 years of church history, with Joseph Smith, his finding of the gold plates, and the Book of Mormon, starting the church. I don't know why it's not working, and all the issues and being persecuted, driven away from the state of Missouri and Illinois, and finally moving west and settling in Utah. But that still leaves perfect. Here we go. 25 snapshots of 5 aspects. So the question I have is, what has happened? What is the transition from the church from since it settled in Utah to the present day? I've done this by taking 5 different times through church history: 1830, 1880, 1930, 1980, and up to today, 2018, and talking about different aspects of the church, 5 different aspects of the church, and see how they've changed and evolved through time. See what we can remember there. So the church was organized by Joseph Smith. Joseph Smith started to have very profound spiritual experiences in 1820. He experienced a vision in which he saw the Father and the Son, and over time he grew to understand more about his calling. He found the golden plates, and the power of God. He translated them to the Book of Mormon. He also learned in the Book of Mormon about the power to baptize that was given to some of the ancient heavens here in the Americas. And he was curious, so he prayed about it with the Associate Oliver Academy, and they received the authority to baptize and to restore the church again. So on April 6, 1830, 6 men, which was required by New York law at the time, got together and founded the church with the congregation of about 30 people present. At that time, they got together. They talked about the revelation that they revealed, which is now section 20 of the Doctrine and Covenants, which talked about the organization of the church, the duties of the church, and they performed a few baptisms, and they instituted the sacrament. It was working a second ago. Well, the next slide talks about missionary work in 1830. So there's a picture of Samuel H. Smith. Almost as soon as the church was started, missionaries began to be called and were sent out to serve in the local area. Now, missionaries at this time were very different than how we understand missionaries nowadays. These were grown men, recently ordained in the church. Sometimes they went with their families, but sometimes their missions just went to a close town or even went back home to their families. And they were called to preach by the way, so they would stop at local congregations and preach there, or they would go to do stump speeches, and they would preach along the way. They also, they went out script per purse, as in the ancient scriptures. There was a lot of missionary training. There was something called the School of the Prophet that was instituted, but for most of the time it was basically a lot of flexibility as long as you taught what was revealed in revelation of the church or from the scriptures. So yeah, let's see what else was very notable about missionaries in this period. Let's see, Samuel Smith had the honor of being one of the first missionaries. Missionary usually lasted about 2 weeks to almost 2 years, so a different time frame than what we think about missionary work nowadays in the church. Church meetings. So it was they brought up the traditions about the idea what the Sabbath day. So they would save from work, they saved from all work. And what's interesting is that the sacrament was not associated with the Sabbath at the very first. Later in 1831, there was a regulation that said the sacrament is part of the Sabbath. For that, the sacrament was often celebrated on a weekday, and meetings were very different. They usually had two preaching meetings, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. And what they would do during these meetings is they would preach, and it was often out of doors. They would often borrow barns or a place where they could meet from other churches. And one time Joseph Smith would preach a sermon that was 3.5 hours long, for example. So it was a very different feel to it. Even the Kirtland Temple, which was later established in Kirtland, the first held in New York. The difference is they moved to Kirtland, and even in Kirtland, there's only the biggest building that they met in, only called 500 to 1,000 people. So most of this was very open air. Also, the sacrament was passed around in cups and plates. The wine later the water in a cup, and the bread on a plate. And while it was being served, often preaching would be going on simultaneously. So instead of it being silent like it is more in our day, it was they would preach, talk, and it was part of the tradition. So, controversies. So even in the very beginning, Mormons, as they became to be nicknamed, were not very accepted by the majority of the populace. One reason is because is the idea of the Godhead, of God being three separate beings, which is the church doctrine, and the idea of God having a physical body. There's actually some differences, theological differences. There's also some social differences. As a whole, remember, the church are very united and very economically. They tended to trade with each other. They tended to vote according to religious beliefs, which is very with the prophet. There's a lot of tension, a lot of suspicion, and a lot of hatred, and eventually war. As you can see in this painting of the Missouri War, the church was eventually driven out of Kirtland and Missouri, and they settled up in Nauvoo. So, some traditions. This is the Joseph Smith Mansion House. It was where Nauvoo was kind of where the church really settled and established some of the traditions from before. When the church first started out, the idea of dancing was very remarkable from the Protestantism at the time, which said that dancing was with suspicion and almost like a sin. That some members could be disfellowshipped if they participated in dancing. But during the time of Nauvoo, it became more of a social thing, and it was more like there were parties held here. There was more of a community. The School of the Prophet, which was established in Kirtland, and later other educational enterprises in Nauvoo, was sort of the foundation of the tradition of education in the church. So, in 1880, now fast forwarding 50 years, we've kind of jumped over the martyrdom of Joseph Smith, and Brigham Young became the next president of the church, and the establishment their establishment in Utah. So this is the Lion House. As you can see, it's named for this lion. It was one of the houses of Brigham Young. The church administration building was between the Lion House and the Beehive House. The two houses of Brigham Young. The Beehive House was kind of more of a formal house, like guests were invited there, dignitaries were received there. The Lion House was a residential. There's like 12 rooms in here because Brigham Young was a polygamist and he had 12 wives that he lived with here. And so it's very, very central, very not so much of a centralized, building for church just between these houses. Also here was established the Retrenchment Society for young women, which was a society against the kind of the social rules of the day, and which became part of the women's program. All right, missionaries. So this was actually, I don't remember which one, but one of these missionaries actually got killed in Georgia from a mob. But missionaries at this time, so they started around 1876. They started to consolidate more into regular missions, and were assigned mission, had a mission president, like it is today. Before, a lot of missions were just sent out to settle in an area or to do exploratory, to even mine for gold. But it was very hard to see from like a mission from other business of the church, which was technically tied to like settling Utah, because at this time the government in Utah was the church. Well, so just around the 1880s or a little bit before, it was just a church in this area. They started to be sent out in a more organized fashion. Church meeting. This is the tabernacle. It was built to be a place for I guess to come together. It still follows some of the it still follows some of the way of the vision of the church in 1830. It had a lot of meetings, a lot of them during the week. There wasn't a day of a 3-hour church. It was a lot of hours, and oftentimes during the week. The sacrament was also on plates and cups. There was a very nice silver cup associated with the tabernacle. I believe in the tabernacle. And they also, the Sunday schools were very different. They had 200 Sunday schools set up, and they did lessons, recitation sketches, and exams. That was interesting to me. That was the first exam associated with a Sunday school. That's interesting. What else? I think I'll move on to the next. Controversies. The biggest controversy of this era was polygamy. This is man married to 3 different women. And so polygamy was sort of started clandestinely in 1843 by Joseph Smith, because it wasn't part of the churches until the church moved out west. And then it became a much bigger thing. A lot of people didn't participate in polygamy. Those who did, most of them just had 2 wives, but then some bishops had more, and Brigham Young had quite a few. So it was very controversial. People didn't really like it. The Republican Party during this time, its platform was to go against the twin relics of barbarism, slavery and polygamy. They actually passed an anti-polygamy law when Abraham Lincoln was in office. It was never enforced because of the Civil War. They didn't really have the interest to enforce it. The church said, well, they don't have, the federal government doesn't have a right to come in and I guess mess with what we believe is originally the religious principle. And the nation as a whole did not really like that response, that idea. So they worked vociferously against it. There was a lot of anti-church things going on. That's one of the reasons why the missionaries were murdered by a mob. They actually had a court case which they sent to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court decided against the man. The pressure became worse and worse, and as the church, people they tended to hide if they were married to one person, or eventually by 1890 the church would say enough is enough, and they officially banned traditions. So dancing became a major part of the culture, mostly in Utah because that's where church was at this time. So it was. So they had that. So dancing was viewed a little differently. There was the settlers were known for working very hard, and dancing was the way they took a break and they relaxed a little bit. They had a lot of square dancing, and then during this time, at first it was suspicion, but later it became more accepted. The waltz, round dancing, and polka. I believe it was during this time. This is a picture of Brigham Young Academy, I believe it is. The church tried, as it was settling, tried to set up a lot of schools. It took a lot of time because there's a lot of demand and not a lot of resources. Many members of the church were educated in Protestant schools. The church founded the University of Deseret, which later became the University of Utah, and then members of the church did through the Utah legislature. And then the church decided to build a church-funded school, which was the Union Academy, which didn't really work out. Then they tried again with the Brigham Young Academy, and which was led by Carl G. Mazer, and it a lot of changes, and that was the forerunner of Brigham Young College and then Brigham Young University. So that's when this stuff was set up. And a lot of dance classes here, and that was an important part of that. So we're jumping ahead again to 1930. The truth is, when I did this presentation, this was the period of time that was hardest to find resources about. I think it's because in 1930, people weren't really thinking much about the church, and also because the bigger events of this time, World War I, World War II, and the Great Depression, contributed to making the church not as big of an issue, or people not really thinking about it as much. And also just the fact that the church went from being a very outside group to being much more accepted within the United States. This is the church administration building. Joseph F. Smith commissioned it because the church headquarters had been moving around. A lot of the members were spread abroad. So it was hard to come together and make decisions. So we decided to build this. This is an impressive structure. It's pretty cool. It's really nice work here, and it's where the church was headquartered for a long time. Now church offices there. You can ignore the building in the background. That wasn't here during this time. It was added in. I'll talk more about it. But yeah, this is where the church was headquartered. Also, I forgot to mention that the first tours of Temple Square started with Temple Brigham Young. During this time, this area at Temple Square became a major cultural hub of the church. There were the broadcasts. I believe it started at this time. It was right at this time. The broadcasts from the Tabernacle Choir. There was the tours. The Harvard became internationally known and prestigious. It was a very beautiful, sacred place, and got a lot of good impressions of the church based on these tours. And later, the Salt Lakes, the Temple Square mission, which was just to talk with people and answer the question if anyone was more interested. And that was missionaries. So sure was also led by great events. One big dramatic example happened about 8 years later, from 1930, when the missionaries had to be evacuated very quickly from Europe as World War II broke out by President Garf. There's a lot of pretty hairy stories, like they barely made it out. Missionaries kind of they lost contact, but they made it, but they all made it. It's pretty cool. David O. McKay also had the church was getting more international during this time. And it started to spread around the world. President McKay did a World War tour during this time, and also the beginnings of the first centralized training area for missionaries was the Salt Lake Missionary Home. It was a nice place. It was a nice home. They were there for a little bit. They learned had some athletic things. They learned about preaching the gospel. They had a little bit of genealogy instruction, and then they were sent out. I don't think a lot of missionaries took this, but this is the beginning. What would later become the MTC. So, church meetings. At this time, the church started to consolidate. Said that they should start moving the meetings towards Sunday, and use for families. It was during the time that the idea of individual glass cups were first introduced as part of the sacrament. It was, they started to phase out cups and plates, so they would still use that. They still had some meetings during the week, and but it was starting to become more consolidated. Controversies. This period had less controversies, although there were still a few there. This is interesting. Let's see if I can get this going. Yeah, looks like the shit's acting up again or something. Anyway, so controversies. This here is Reed Smoot. Reed Smoot was a senator from Utah. There was still a lot of prejudice toward the church. Even though he had been duly elected, people wouldn't want to let him take a seat. There was a national debate about the whole business. The internet, most of the time. Anyway, So anyway, there was actually a national debate over whether Ray should be allowed to have a seat. Eventually, it was decided in his favor, and he went on to serve many years in the U.S. Senate. Then the polygamy was fully phased out, even though there had been an official declaration to stop. There was still practice a little bit on the side because members felt kind of coerced. But mostly just because it was so unpopular. It was finally phased out in even where the church could have potentially done it, such as in Mexico. There we go. All right. Also during this period was questions about prohibition and the temperance movement. Some members of the 12, the governing body of the church, were against it. Reed Smoot, who was also an apostle, was kind of moving against it just because he saw it as politically feasible. Heber J. Grant was very much in favor of it, and President Joseph Smith was kind of against it, kind of in favor. So there's a lot. So the idea of political neutrality, which is a big part of it, wasn't as strong of an idea. The church also came out a lot against communism, calling it a great satanic evil, very dangerous thing during this time, which was not controversial then, because both people in the United States were not favors of it anyway. I believe that was mostly what I about the controversies of this period. All right, so traditions. There was still the continued dance issues. The church during this time became known for their dancing was a major part of the culture. And a lot of more modern dances were introduced into this time, such as the bunny hop and the dances of the time. We also had the establishment of the Maya, which is the Mutual Improvement Association, which was sort of like the follow-up from the Replenishment Society and sort of leaning more towards what we have today. Still not committing to working. All right. Then we had. All right. So then we're going to jump another 50 years to 1980. So the great big building in the background, image before, is the church office building, and it is 28 stories tall, and it is the center administration building of the church. Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It was completed in 1975. What's interesting is that this building covered, in order to build it, they demolished a lot of historical buildings, such as the genealogical society, apartments. What else? There's some other ones that I never mentioned at this moment. They've moved the LDS Bridges College. A lot of the early stuff was moved around in order to build this building. There's originally going to be 38 stories for 48 years of Joseph Smith when he died, but they cut it out because they discovered that it was not architecturally feasible for the water and the resources they had available. It was some of the 10 floors that were going to be added were going to be for were going to be for missionaries with the completion of the MTC. That became less important. That was a major change to this. So it became the church office building management was now an increasingly growing. Missionaries. So the MTC was completed in 1978, and that's actually across the street from where I'm at right now. It's where missionaries are trained, and so I transitioned from the Salt Lake Missionary Home to the learning center to the MTC. And also the church started to expand its presence, especially in Africa, which will go a little later in controversies, and into Africa and South America and Brazil. And most aspects of current missionary culture were sort of established during this time. Missionaries were, white shirts and ties, compassion had been there for a long time, but districts and transfers and all these things kind of really came really came together during this time. Opening the letter, which usually got phased out, but yeah. Church meetings. So during 1980, they introduced what was known as the consolidated 3-hour block. They took off the meetings during the middle of the week. Primarily was in the middle of the week. They put it together one block in a 3-hour block. They took away one day of jail cards. So the idea of this was to make it a more consolidated time, make it easier on families who are traveling, and make it easier to participate. All right. This is working right. All right. So, the next slide is controversies. Now, there were a lot of controversies in this period. Very big contrast between 1930 and 1980. How many controversies were surrounding the churches. One of them was the Equal Rights Amendment. It was a proposed amendment to the Constitution. Its stated purpose was to make great more equality between men and women. The church felt that it went too far and blurred the lines for what the church sees as a very important institution. Well, okay. At any rate, let's see if this works a little bit later. No, it wasn't. All right. The church came out against it, and it recruited members from the wards across Utah to attend a big women's conference that was kind of to garner support. And during the conference, the women in the church to vote down pretty much anything and to disrupt the meeting. So they did. And they used the organization of the networks across the church to organize campaigns going door to door, and they were a major part of defeating the Equal Rights Amendment, which made some people not very happy. There's a few excommunications related with opposition to ERA, and criticizing the leadership of the church. There we go. Also, during this time, in 1978, so this is the time of Brigham Young. Brigham was the first one to really come out strongly. There had been a ban on annexing the priesthood to blacks, which became increasingly more difficult. The church took a little longer than the nation to fully rescinding that. Some of the factors that came into that was the civil rights movement. Also, increased presence in Africa and in Brazil. In Brazil, the idea was that if there's a single job, it would be better just not to teach them or to baptize them or to extend the priesthood to them. But when you go to Brazil, the ability to really distinguish is difficult. And when to build a temple was hard, so it was hard to know. It would be hard to keep this policy going in the face of this issue. Also, there was other expansion, and it started to become less and less palatable when there's the church, and then people started to question it and took it to the Lord, and then it was stopped the policy. All right, there we go. Hopefully this time it'll work. All right. Anyway, so those are some of the issues of that time. The last one. Oh yeah, and when the policy was instituted, the church started to grow, and it expanded into Africa, and it's kind of become what it is today. This letter, it's a really interesting story. So there was a man who had been a member of the church. He had served in England. He was Mark Hoffman. He was very interested in historical documents, and he started to produce documents such as this one. This is supposedly some of the original rubbings from the plates, golden plates, of which the Book of Mormon came from, that were produced by Martin Harris. He supposedly found it. It is a forgery, but it was a very active forgery. It fooled experts, it fooled many church members. Then over time, Mark Hoffman got more and more bold in his forgeries. Starting with a letter that was supposedly Brigham Young was his successor, Joseph Smith, according to tradition of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. But there were other members who vied for church leadership, I guess, during this time. And he forged a letter to Joseph Smith III, which Joseph Smith supposedly gave him the authority to in the church. And it was very controversial. The church wanted to acquire it. Howard Kaufman played the LDS church and the RLDS church against each other, tried to get the best bidder. He eventually sold it to the LDS church that leaked its contents. So that was damaging. Probably one of the worst letters was one called the Salamander Letter, which it says described Joseph Smith writing about his visit of Angel Moroni and portraying him as a salamander. And that it was a very weird document, very confusing about Jewish history. And then it kind of hurt the church. Some people were trying to question the church, some people left over it. And then Mark Kaufman, he was a very good forger, but the net was getting closer, and he finally ended up murdering 2 people to try to hide it. It eventually all came out, and people today are like, well, if they're prophets, why were they taken in by this very bad man? Food for thought. It was definitely a controversy. I guess you have to consider that the presidency of the church have never said they're infallible. The clean revelation of God doesn't make them somehow infallible, angelic, perfect beings. Anyway, that's a objective member of the church. Anyway, so moving from the controversies, the culture this time. So during the 1980s was kind of more introduced what became known as for the strength of youth. Let's see how I move on to this slide. For the strength of youth, which is a document that talks about different some guidelines for living for the youth. It was kind of started during this time. Yeah. All right, and which is kind of asks for more cleanliness, living a clean life, abstaining from things that break things such as the word of wisdom, alcohol, tobacco, cafe, coffee. Also against tattoos, and also against living a very morally upright life, keeping the law of chastity. Seminary institutes at schools. So inside the church started to expand the church educational system to include building schools in far reaches of the globe and establishing the seminary institutes. Okay. Well, with that, we move into the modern period. The church HQ hasn't changed too much in 1980. They built the conference center, and I don't know the exact date. It's probably around, I want to say 2012, around then. They completed I'm probably wrong, the conference center, the biggest religious arenas in the world. It's where the General Conference is broadcasted. There it is. Yep, it's an impressive building, and it is where it is kind of a cultural hub of the church, I guess. That's where it's the most personal connection that the leadership of the church can have with what is now 15, 16, 17 million members. It's broadcast, so this is like a major cultural hub. It's also stated that it was designed to last for like 150 years. You could put like 18 million more pounds on the roof and it wouldn't collapse. It's enormous inside. I think it's a cool building. Also, the Church History Museum was completed during this time. Missionaries. So in 2003, before it was very rote presentation about way missionaries, they would come in, they would present a very specific thing, they would ask certain questions, expecting certain answers, that would lead to other statements. It kind of worked for consolidating that, but preaching by gospel is a lot more flexible. President Gordon B. Hinckley of the church felt that it was also helpful because there was a huge worry about retention. People were baptized with a lot of energy, but afterward would end up falling away. And he was hoping that this would help with that issue, and create a more flexible program. Also, the missionary exchange was lowered in 2012. beforehand, elders could only serve at age 19, and sisters at age 21, and now it's elders can serve at age 18 and sisters at 19. So it's a major change. Age. Yep. So I guess you can say there's not been a lot of major changes in 1980. There's a few things there that some specific. Church meetings is a national conference. The 3-hour block, which has been going on for 38 years, was announced to be reduced to a 2-hour block, so 2-hour church now. A lot of members and friends were very excited about that. The idea is, again, like some of the other changes to the church meetings, make it easier on families, focus more on the home as the place for gospel teaching, and to just make it easier. Here we go. And it's not incorporating in controversies. So everything in the past, every past controversy the church has ever had, except for probably some of the one in 1930, is resurfaced fairly consistently. So we can put all those as background. Adding to the more modern controversies is the gay rights movement. The church has a pretty strong position on it, and calling homosexual activity a sin, and saying that we should love everyone. Like those two big ideas. Well, people who join a lot of controversy, some excommunications around it, a lot of church opposition, and perfect. Gender issues. So quickly with the Me Too movement, there's been some accusations, sexual abuse. One of the daughter, I think it is, of President Nelson, has been accused of sexually abusing. Although it's an old case, look through it. It's hard to tell. Like all these things. Also, a previous president of the MCC has been accused. That's pretty hairy. And modern controversies. Traditions. So it's a worldwide church, not just concentrated in Utah, although a lot of culture is based in Utah. Tradition around the world is sometimes Sundays are not held on. Sometimes the church meetings are not held on Sunday. In some predominantly Muslim countries, like in Dubai, they hold it on Friday, and kind of acquiesces to local culture. Also in Asia, where there's mandatory 6-hour schedules, they have a sacrament meeting every day of the week to accommodate those who would be unable to attend otherwise. Also, there is different ways of greeting that are very distinct around the world. The church meetings, some different ways of getting together. In Samoa, and I believe it's Samoa, the elders wear kind of a belt with a mat, and the sisters wear traditional dress. So the way the formal dress code is different in different cultures. So it kind of creates a worldwide thing. The strength of the youth creates a very distinct youth culture. Again, abstaining from sexual activities before marriage, clean language, living a wholesome lifestyle. And there's been a lot of people who get annoyed by the very insular culture, which seems to be pretty much from the beginning of the church. People have not really liked how insular their church is. And they feel excluded or miffed by sometimes overzealousness in wanting to preach the gospel, sometimes crossing certain boundaries. But it's a very insular culture. Most of the Utah culture is very insular. So, some concluding thoughts. So, I guess the idea that the church is a static, unchanging entity that has remained true as steadfast to the entire church of its history should be modified a little bit. There are certainly some principles and some doctrines that have been pretty consistent, but the way some institutions have changed, over time, and have evolved to accommodate for the time And another thing is that controversy is just part of the church. It's been controversial since day one, and for different reasons, as you can see. So it shouldn't be too surprising that there's controversy. And I guess it's a comfort to know that for members of the church seeing the ambiguity today, that there's always been some ambiguities. There's always been some conflict surrounding the church and everything, the black and white. It's not always been easy to see through everything. And that's just interesting to see how things have changed and we thought differently. I guess it's a presentation. Yeah. Look at the references and didn't finish that part quite yet. I'll get them in the final paper. But yes, this is my presentation of the church over the course of its 200-year history. Different aspects of the church. I focus on certain things more than others based on where I'm able to find, but at least to paint an interesting picture, to give an idea of the cultural trends and the difference of the church at different points in its history.